great community. It really, really is.
Yeah.
I'm Rebecca. I live in Tustin.
Thanks for coming.
And I'm Robin. This is Danica. She's my sister for a long time. So I heard she was in the area.
Did you know about her book? Like, have you known it's been in the works and stuff? Did it just publish then?
January.
January, okay.
Came
Awesome.
out in January, and yeah, it's been an amazing adventure and ride, and meeting people in different communities has been maybe perhaps the biggest gift in it. So thanks for coming out. Do you know anything about the book?
A little bit.
Do you want to read the synopsis?
Yeah, I have. I've seen it actually here in this bookstore.
Well, I can tell you about it so that you don't have to do too much reading until you get home. But I've spent the last 30 years helping companies get incredibly clear about who they are. And I do what's called brand strategy. And so my job with companies is to help them get crystal clear about the essence of who they are so that they don't get lost when making decisions or taking actions. They're always reminded, no matter how high stakes or high pressure their competition gets, or managing the ups and downs of their business, that they don't get lost and distracted about what makes them them and where they want to go. Because when you have clarity, then you have a filter for how you make all of your decisions and what choices you make. And since 2010, which Robin probably knows through reading the book and through her sister, I hit a real crisis of meaning in my own marriage. And I had 3 kids under the age of 5. And I still cook, diaper changer, party dinner, and I got really lost in my own life, and I wasn't sure how to hold it together. And when, in my darkest hour, when I was feeling most at despair, I kind of turned to the practice that I've learned in my job, which is, how do I get to a place of clarity? And I dropped into a different kind of approach to making one of life's maybe trickiest decisions at the time. And I thought my marriage was broken. I thought that I didn't have the right partner. And those were the stories running on loop in my head. But when I allowed myself to write down with real, I call it naked honesty, about what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and most importantly, the question that starts the entire book off, which is, what do I want? Not what do my parents want for me, what does my husband expect, or even what my children need. I need to get first step, secondly, but my relationship with time was hard. The way I was spending my time, who I was saying yes to. I think what came out was that I was living a life of being the good leader, the good wife, the good daughter, the good mom. And there was very little left to myself at the end of the day. And that exhaustion was creating a story in my head that my marriage was broken. And as soon as I saw those patterns out on paper in front of me, I was able to shift my direction and my attention to solving something different.
I had a different set of questions that immediately came up, which is how do I want to spend my time? If I could reimagine that and challenge myself to reimagine that boldly, completely change my schedule, my days, my weeks, my months, what would that look like? And then as I followed that trail of questions, it opened up new ideas and it got to me to what I call now a life brief, which is a creative brief for your life. And in my business, a creative brief is a super sharp declaration of who a company is and where they're going. And that was the origin story, how this was born. And it's a really simple but deeply engaged 3-step process for getting clear in your own life and allowing your life to then unfold from that place of clarity. And it took my family from Northern California to Portland, Oregon. I shifted my work schedule so that I was working 4 days a week, but completely away from the office. So that allowed me to walk my kids to school, allowed me to take them to the doctor when I needed, allowed us to live on less money than what was demanding of us in Northern California. And it radically propelled us from this place of dark despair, frustration, arguing, to 6 months later, a place where we had more time to breathe, more time to spend with each other in a place of presence and meaning. It didn't mean life became completely easy, but we had the spaciousness to have real conversations again, to connect. And what's interesting is since the book launched in January, all of it evolved again. And we find ourselves back to the first life brief we ever wrote, which is in the book. I tell the story of it in 2010. And we're living that brief as our North Star again. And since 2010, I've been writing briefs for every part of my life. And what I mean by that is getting really crystal clear about who I want to be as a parent, how I want to lead in a company, where I want to spend my energy at work, and obviously our marriage, and then also things like my relationship with money. And so it has become a practice that I go to time and again, and that I've been using with people young and old for 10 years before the book even came about. And I've been traveling the country teaching it, and it's been a real gift and joy to see how it works, to use it as a learning lab, to understand what makes us tick and what does clarity give us, and how does it help us through the rough patches and the big decisions and the crossroads in life. So there's 3 parts to the practice. It's get messy, which means ask questions, meet your life with curiosity, engage in it no matter how uncomfortable it is. And once you get messy and you generate your ingredients, then you can get clear. And once you get clear, action naturally falls out of that place of clarity. And so the book is written in those 3 parts. Get Messy is the juiciest, I think, the richest part of the book, and it has stories, my own stories and those of other people in other situations, in other circumstances. And at the end of each chapter, there's a bite-size exercise for you to help you kind of engage and be in relationship with yourself, so that you can ask the penetrating questions and practice the art of being nakedly honest with yourself. And I find that that practice alone is transformative. You don't even have to get to a tangible brief. Just the practice of allowing yourself to be nakedly honest with yourself about what you want can change so many things. And I made them all small and bite sized because we live busy lives. We live in a culture that is full of dramas and distractions. And it's so easy to lose ourselves in either our habits or the easy ways that we tune out or escape. And so, what I want to do is create a practice that people could do without the excuse of being too busy. And so, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take your presence and engagement. I could spend the whole time talking at you, but it's not a really rich community oriented, rich engagement. I'd love to hear if there are any questions, or Robin, if there's anything you experience with this, or, where your curiosity is.
What's it been like teaching it? Is it like businesses hire you then? Companies hire you to come talk to them? Is that how?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of company talks. So at Google, at Apple, at Airbnb, they tend to be places where there are audiences who are high in achievement, low on satisfaction or fulfillment. And that has been interesting. I've also been doing a lot of living room dinners with just a collection of people who gather in a living room over a meal. I find that those are maybe my most joyful interactions, where it's not necessarily about me solo. It's really about the stories that are shared in the room. I think one of the gifts of since the book has launched is seeing how people come together around these prompts. So I have women who are doing the book together individually, and then they meet up someplace and they share what's come up for them over a weekend. I also have online groups, people who are reading the book together and meeting each week, once a week, sharing their responses to each chapter, one chapter at a time. I have families doing it together. So it's really been fun, rich, fulfilling to see all the ways that people are now taking the book and using it and building and deepening relationships around it. And again, I think getting to a clear brief, that clarity is the cherry on top. I think what's happening that I'm seeing is that people are just by being open, vulnerable with each other about what's coming up for them is just deepening a sense of belonging between people, whether they be friends, families, couples, work teams. Yeah.
That's great. I think people should talk more. There's so many things I think we don't talk about because it was our parents never talked about it, so we don't think it's okay to talk about. But it's actually okay to talk about these things.
Yeah.
It's when you talk about these living room dinners, I'm like, oh, they're strangers, and you're telling your most private things to these strangers. But in a way, that's okay too. You're like you said, the community.
Yeah, I find that some people feel more comfortable
Really
telling it to strangers
interesting.
because, as my 17-year-old daughter says, Mom, it's just easier to perform in front of people I'm never going to see again than to actually reveal yourself to people who,
Right.
who know you really well.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the effect.
My daughter is 17 as well.
Congratulations. We have an 18-year-old.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you face any challenges, I guess, getting people to join you on your journey of, creating your own life brief, because probably in the process of you making decisions for your own life, like it obviously affected your marriage or your children's lives as well. Did you face any, I guess, challenges?
Oh, you mean when I got clear and then
Yeah.
how do I
How do
bring
you get
people
everyone
along?
else to
Yes.
go with you? Yeah.
Yes. Here's what I've learned. I'll give you the big learning and then the micro, like what gets tricky in the moments and what I've learned in the thrust of change, right? What I found is once I get clear, I start showing up differently in just really small ways, sometimes just energetically differently. Or other times I'll, because of my clarity, take an action that I don't normally take, right? And that becomes an invitation for the people around you to respond differently. And that kind of, it unfolds change almost organically, not in a direct, hey, I've gotten really clear, now let's do this kind of way, right? It's like someone at work thinks, oh, wow, that was different. And then they respond in kind, right? So I call it a dance. When you start dancing differently in your life, people organize around you differently. But I'm in the thrust of change right now, which because of the book, as I said, so our first life brief was to take our time, which meant take back my time, take back control and be intentional with my time, but also slow down. I was impatient. I was restless. I didn't even know where I was going, but I just had a habit of overbooking myself and living at a pace that was not sustainable. And I find myself right here in the same place now, 14 years later, because the book launched. I had a big job. I couldn't hold both anymore. So last Wednesday was the first day of my new existence where took my job down to 8 days a month so that I can travel around and teach more workshops and such. And it was very scary for my family. And we're moving our family back to Portland, Oregon, after 8 years back in the Bay Area. And it's hard because they had to have conversations with our children, right? It affects their lives. And what you realize is that we carry assumptions about the people closest to us. We predict how they're going to react. And more often than not, they surprise us. But often we don't give them the chance to surprise us because we've already decided in our minds that we know what they're going to do, what they're going to say, how they're going to behave. And that's been the biggest learning about when you get clear about what you want is giving other people around you a chance to surprise you. Sometimes they don't, but oftentimes they do.
And how have you dealt with that when they don't give you the reaction I guess you were hoping for or expecting?
I try to check in on my expectations and my patience. My weak spot is once I've decided I want everyone to be right there. And what I've learned is the best way to deal with my family is I need so my addition to take our time as the brief is in their own time. That I'm going to take my time, but I need them to come on board in their own time. So that has allowed me and my husband to navigate our daughters and then also each other. Because I just had, we all have these roller coasters of emotion. And I've just realized that they will surprise me in time, but it may not be in the moment. And I have to give room for people to absorb, find their own clarity in it and then show up. But often I want to rush to that other side, and it's my own agitation that is disappointing me, not their reactions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad I stumbled upon this. I do feel like I'm kind of like in the midst of a lot of change right now. So yeah, I think I'm definitely gonna.
You are in the midst of a lot of change right now, I would say, right? You just moved.
Yes.
You just stepped out
Yes.
independently
Yes.
away from your family. That's a tender time.
Yeah. Like nearing the end of my 20s also, so that's like a big change. Just a lot of work stuff too. I'm kind of stepping into like a more leadership position at work. So it has been a lot of change.
Yeah. And you can say that and you can embrace that. I think the invitation with the practice is to give yourself space to ask yourself the questions of, who do I want to be as a leader? What do I what are other leaders that I admire, and what are the traits that they embody? Oftentimes we run into the next phase and we don't ask ourselves the questions. We just hope for the best. And that's a great way. I mean, that's one way to live. And this, I think, when people talk about how do we live more intentionally, how do we, intentionality is about taking the pause, dropping in, and saying, okay, what do I want this leadership experience to be? What do I want college to be? And it may not be in that big a chunk either. It may be, what do I want these first steps to be? How do I want to show up? How do I want to be different? And how do I want to hold on to the things that are sacred and non negotiable about who I am? And what am I willing to flex? What am I willing to experiment with? And where am I not willing to bend? Those are all really good questions, to sit with. Let them sink in and stir, as I say. And then to capture it in writing. I say in the book, writing rearranges the furniture of our minds. Oftentimes, when we're just thinking and then feeling, it gets really confusing and muddled in there. But when we put down the things that are coming up, one, we get to park it and create more space for other things to come up. We also get to distance it from our emotions. And we can park it and come back to it later when we're less hot, less agitated, less frustrated, less worried, and then see with curiosity, what did we actually write down? Is it true? How do we know it's true? Or was it just a moment of mood? And then over time, if you've collected it over time, you start to see what are the patterns. And when you see the patterns, that's when you're seeing your real voice come out. So I have in the at the beginning of the book, the first exercise is to just practice dropping in and tuning into yourself. So it's not a do kind of exercise, it's a be. Can you just practice being? And can you do it for 10 minutes? Can you do it for 5 minutes? If 10 minutes is too long, can you do it for 3 minutes? If that's even too long. So I'm trying to invite the reader to go to the smallest possible thing that you can't make an excuse for, right? I call it inexcusable. And if you can make it irresistible, even better, right? I'm going to do it over a hot cup of tea in my bathrobe, lying down, or I'm going to be, whatever it is that makes that exercise something you look forward to. The second exercise is what I call a daily brain dump, which is just again, you set a timer, 10, 5, 3, whatever amount of time, and you allow yourself to write with that naked honesty. No judgment, no editing, no withholding. It can be chicken scratch. There's no rules to this. A lot of people come in, they're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. If you're doing it, it's right. Yeah.
Is that like the morning?
It's almost
pages?
like morning pages. Yeah.
Which
And
is
this just
kind of-
has no rules,
Right,
right?
right.
And the only practice is the allowing what's inside, to come out
the
and onto the
consistency
page.
and
The
doing it.
consist,
That's
yes.
the part I always think gets me. I have a lot of good intentions, and then
Yeah.
a week later, I'm like, I'll do something else.
Yeah.
Doing something else I'm distracted by. So.
And I have people come up to me and say, I've been telling everyone in my life, I don't know what I want. Then I read my daily brain dumps. I'm not talking a lot of time, a week's worth, 2 weeks worth. And they said, it's so clear I do know what I want because it's coming out again and again and again and again, different words, different expressions, but you start to see the themes. I had a woman who took a April workshop with me and then again in December. And in the December workshop, she was like, oh my God, I just did the exercise you had me do. And then I opened up what I wrote in April, and it's the same. So there's stuff inside us that we bat away, we suppress, we ignore, we avoid, but it's always there. And when we let our pen lead and capture it, it's our truth. It's the essence. And then when we allow ourselves to look at it and see it and then accept it, that's where change really starts. And you don't have to have the full on plan. But what you do have is you have dropped into relationship with yourself. And I know this went around the internet for a long, maybe 10 years ago. But there's a palliative nurse, who did end of life care, who published her findings on the top 5 regrets people have at the end of their lives. And the number one regret consistently was that I didn't live a life of my own making, that I lived somebody else's story. And I think that is the work for all of us in this life, is to really ask ourselves, whose story are we living? Is it mine? Is it somebody else's? Because along the way, we're always collecting other people's voices, right? You know the voice of your mom, your sister, your dad, your best friend. We start to, we almost could role play what we think they would say or do. And sometimes those voices become louder than our own. And this book is the practice of reconnecting with your voice so that you can live from that place of truth. And it evolves and grows as we grow and changes as we learn. And that the practice follows it. There's no concrete set in stone. These briefs are meant to change along with you, but they become a record of where you are and where you want to go in this chapter or in this time, in this part of your life. And if you never, ever write a brief, what the book will do and the practice will do is just connect you back to yourself. And to me, that is the best kind of outcome.
How often are you saying you're updating your life briefs or making new ones?
Well, the life brief we're living right now is the one that keeps coming up time and again. And then there are briefs that have had their time and place, and yay, we put that to bed. But 18 months ago, January of 2023, we wrote a big life brief, which was for the life brief to become our lives, you know? And I've been doing my career for 30 years, and it's terrifying to step off that identity, to step off the ledge, even with so much evidence behind us that this works and this takes us, even with all that data, I guess, to back it and proof, it's still hard to take those steps and unwind and make change. So I am super empathetic to that, but I call this a creative and a courageous practice. The creativity comes because when you get clear about what you want, you start to see new ideas for how to make it happen, right? Like I wrote that first brief, I saw that time was the problem. Then I started generating all kinds of ideas for how I could spend my time differently. It's a courageous practice because it's courageous to allow ourselves to declare to ourselves what we really want without any guarantee that we're going to get it. That is an act of courage right then and there. And then it's courageous to step into it and honor it. But I will say, when you do step into it, so many surprises and moments of serendipity start to show up in your life. And then it becomes a choice of whether you turn to those moments and allow them to create momentum, or you hang on to the doubt and the fear. And there are moments of doubt and fear. But part 3 of the book helps you enlist the people around you who can help you brave those moments, with honesty, with love, with compassion, with humor, whatever you need to help you continue to step into it. Yeah.
I like that you made these Mad Libs. These that's
Yeah.
that's super helpful. I think. Do you want to tell her about
Yeah.
the Mad Libs? Because I don't think I did do it justice.
Well, as we start to get clear and write our briefs, sometimes it's hard to see where we start. Writing is not an easy thing to do, especially writing for clarity. So Mad Libs is I pulled out different sentence structures for the different parts of your life, to help you just fill in the blanks. Try on different adjectives, right? Because the words can be juicy. The difference between one, declaration and another can be the difference between yes, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to forget it. And I think it's about finding the words that are right for you and trying those on and seeing what motivates you. So it's a learning of, what gets me going? What propels me into action versus what sinks me into, I don't feel it. I think when we feel it, we do it. That's what I've learned. What do you think as an 18-year-old listening to all of this? Yeah. Well, there's 2 ways to write, which are both in the book. One is to get things out of you. I call it letting the pen lead, and just again, that practice of permission. And then the second part of the book is writing for distillation and clarity.
I never stay consistent with writing.
And that's okay. I am the most reluctant writer you'll probably ever meet. The fact that I've written a book is still a shock to my system. Everyone's like, what's your next book going to be? You know what? I wrote one book. I feel pretty darn good just being able to say that. So I am a really super reluctant writer. So all these bite-size exercises I wrote for myself. because I know I would rather pick up social media, take my kids out for a meal, go meet a friend, take a bath, do all the things, anything but right. But I have found in my work and my life that when I get to it, I never regret it. So make it as easy and fun.
Yeah, 'cause
Right.
I feel like it might just be me, but sometimes I get just like more stressed out, like
Yeah.
writing, and just like
Reliving it.
thinking about it, and I can't like.
So, okay, so I work with a writer, and so I said, what is your most inexcusable commitment to this? How can you make this? She's writing a novel, right? And she does this thing where she builds it up in her head and she gets paralyzed. And then the resistance like become like a brick wall, right? And I said, okay, if you break it down to the tiniest part, what would she goes, okay, every morning I'm going to open the document to my book. That's it. That's it. And she was like, okay, if I can't do that, that's going to just, I don't have, there's no commitment to write even a single word. And so what she found was she would open it, and that was the easiest commitment she could make, and she never made it bigger than that. And sometimes she'd open it and not write a thing. She'd read something. Sometimes she'd open it and write one sentence. And then sometimes she opened it and wrote 500 words. But she did the open, that was the only commitment for 30 days. And after 30 days, she had more words than she had generated in 3 months. So it's almost like gamifying ourselves, right? And it's a practice of self awareness. How do we make it fun, exciting, anything but drudgery or paralyzing? It's a fun challenge. Maybe not a fun challenge, but it's a good challenge.
Was there kind of like a big moment in your life that kind of made you realize you had to slow down, or did it just kind of like come to you over time?
Every moment is a reminder that I need to slow down, and I'm only finally acting on it, you know? Um, I think what I've learned in the last 14 years is I was being an immigrant to this country and feeling like an outsider as a kid. I think it instilled or raised a desire to work hard and prove that I was worthy, that I could prove all those people who made fun of me wrong, that I was better than that. And I think that kicked off a habit of overachieving, and that was my way of continuing to prove time and again that I'm worthy. Did a lot of great things, in terms of big achievements, financial success, all the things. But now I'm at a place in my life where I realize the stickers don't really mean anything anymore. The next peak, it's exhausting, and the fulfillment lasts only this long. And I don't really want to grind to make the living that I'm used to making so that we can live in the community where it never stops, right? And so I think finally I've realized it's time to kind of get off and live a different pace. That I probably don't have anything, I don't have anything to prove anymore. Um, and I would rather spend my time differently, with my kids before they go away, because I realize once they turn 18 and they go off, the bulk of the time that I have with them is already over. And that makes me sad. Really, really sad. Proud, but sad.
I feel the same way. My son sent me a text, something along the same lines. He's gonna be 21 soon, so he sent me something.
Congratulations.
Thank you. He sent me some text. He's like, "Did you know this?" And it was something similar to like, by the time you reach 21, you'll have already spent 90% of your time with your parents, or something
Yes.
like that. And I was like, "Oh my god."
Yes.
So I mean, I feel similar. I think we're similar in our age or our life experiences, and it's like my kids are still at home. One's almost 18, one's almost 21, and I'm like, I'm finally enjoying them. I love having them there. I don't want them to move out into, the world is this hard, scary place. So I feel really lucky that I get to see them as adults, and you know, but I know it's once they're gone.
You don't get that time back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That when they don't, neither one of them has a girlfriend or a partner yet. When we're all still living under the same roof, that's a really valuable time.
It really is. And I look at this, what's happening here. I have a 10-year-old and I cling on to her as much as I can. And I realize the life that I have created for myself doesn't give me that. And so here's my favorite question of recent, in the last 4 years. What is enough? I like it even more than what do you really, really want? What is enough? What is enough in terms of money? What is enough in terms of shoes? Whatever you want to, you can apply that word, that question to anything. What is enough in terms of accolades or achievements or stickers and gold stars? But what is enough? And can you translate that into a tangible term? And I'm still the primary breadwinner of our house, of our family. And once my husband and I were able to answer it tangibly, it took so much weight off my shoulders to be able to go, okay. And then when we were able to look at the way we were living and the construct that we're living in with the big job and with the all that, it felt like it was never enough. But if we change the construct with just the pot that we have now, it can be way more than enough. And that's the thing that's really interesting when we look at time or our attention or our finances, or it's often how are you configuring it, right? And you can have the same pot, the same capacity, the same 24 hours, 7 days a week, but the way you reconfigure it can move you from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance. And that choice is within us. It's hard to see sometimes. It's why the invitation to get messy. You got to kind of let all the contradictions out, see it for its mess. Yeah. It's interesting. I've been working a lot with CEOs, CMOs, startup founders, venture capitalists, and I'll tell you, they struggle with the same issues that everybody else does. In fact, maybe in a more intense way, because they're I guess they're overtrained in one area of their life, but they're actually completely beginners in other areas of their life. So I had someone who is a founder of a venture fund. So he's in the business of money, wanting to life brief his relationship with money. And it was really interesting. And I asked him, what shift do you want to make? in doing this life briefing. And he said, I want to go from fear and frustration to inner peace. And then so as he got messy and we started asking the questions, he was able to pinpoint that with every year, if he was to be nakedly honest, every year he finds he needs less money to be happy. But his family is spending more every year. And we found that that was the place of friction. We also identified that his own accountability in it was that he wasn't talking to his wife about their finances. He was taking it all. He was looking at the math. He was looking at the bank accounts. He was looking at all the things. She had no idea. So she was just doing her thing, spending like their friends, you know, wanting the house that she wanted, wanting all the things. But he wasn't letting her in on the actual situation. And she didn't work. And so his tiny step of action, his clarity was, I want to be in alignment with my family about our finances. And I know this is a very 1% situation, but what it goes to show is that we are all struggling with the same thing. We're not communicating with the people around us who have the ability to support us in where we want to go. And his first action step was, I'm going to be more proactive about having these conversations with my wife. And I'm going to have them from a place of joy and possibility, not fear and frustration. Because the way it was coming out was hard for her. And he realized if he did it more with more frequency, more proactivity, it would get easier. And then she would be aware and they could maybe make different choices together. And he didn't have to be so alone in it. So I think allowing himself to get vulnerable and messy. He grew up in Detroit. His dad was an auto worker. His mom, had a job, but they didn't need much to be really rich in family. But now he's moved to the Bay Area, and keeping up with the Joneses there or the Kardashians or whoever you want to keep up with, that becomes a hard life, especially when that's not the ways that you find joy, enjoyment, aliveness. And so it's very interesting, the stories I've had the honor and gift of hearing and working with and working through with people. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And thank you for making time to be here.
I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for sharing your own questions and stories. Yeah.
So tell us more about your online. You said you have online classes. Do you have a website?
I have a website, thelifebrief.com.
Okay.
I'm just setting it up. I've been doing workshops with corporate teams, with individuals. I've been doing one-on-one work with individuals.
I'd be very interested in trying to do like a book club sort of situation.
Yeah.
Not even, it doesn't have to be physical in person.
No, lots of virtual things like that. Yeah, I would.
For myself, if nobody else joins in, that's
Well, I would love to help you make that happen.
that would be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for coming out. And I love the cozy opportunity.
Can I get a picture of you with your book?
Absolutely.
Instagram and all that.
Instagram and all that. It's like,
I
I know. I love
I'm
that
too
you.
old for all of this, but I still do it. I'm like.
Listen, it has made this book tour,
So I get the RV to sign it.
amazing.
Okay, you have to get the name box. All right. 1, 2, 3. Very nice. tonight.
Thank
Do you mind
you.
if I just take a picture of us? Do you mind?
Yeah,
Is that
that'd be
all right? I'll
great.
stand here with you.
Oh my